So when you make reading your entire personality, as I have, you run into this fun little situation where someone will inevitably ask you for a book recommendation and you will suddenly feel like you have read no books ever. Because realistically, your favorite books are either going to be too smutty, too depressing, or just too fucking weird to recommend to any normal person. So thankfully, I have curated 5 books that I would recommend to anyone, reader, non-reader, friend, foe, enemy, lover, anyone. And I'm gonna be honest, none of these books are like groundbreaking discoveries or recommendations. Some of them are very well-known titles, but I do think that if you don't know what to recommend to someone who doesn't read, or you don't know what to recommend to someone you don't know, these are the books I use in those situations, and they're all 5-star reads for me. All right, so without further ado, disclaimer aside, let's get into it. The first book I recommend is Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. I don't know how I went 22 years without reading this, and I am a little bit disheartened that it took me having a crush on a boy who recommended it to me for me to read it. However, I'm really glad I did because this is phenomenal. The thing is, this isn't even one of my favorite Vonnegut books. I think so far, at least, Cat's Cradle is, but I think this is the book that I would recommend to pretty much anyone. I mean, Kurt Vonnegut is known for his satirical black comedy, but I think that because this book is so just matter-of-factly written, about war and death and all that fun stuff, anyone will really like it, and it's really easy to read, and it's super short as well. And I have obviously heard the phrase "so it goes" before, but I never knew it was a Kurt Vonnegut quote. I always just thought Taylor Swift coined it during her Reputation era. In case this wasn't required reading for you in high school and you don't know what it's about, Slaughterhouse 5 follows Billy Pilgrim as he recounts and works his way through his time in World War II, specifically his time in Dresden during like the firebombing and everything. So it's really interesting, really morbid, but very matter-of-factly written and funny. And you wouldn't think funny and war go together, but they do. And it's so good. And I would recommend this to literally everyone, which is the point of this video. The next book I have to recommend is Stone Butch Blues by Leslie Feinberg. Leslie Feinberg is quite frankly one of the coolest people I've ever read about. She's a radical communist who has put in tons of work towards queer literature and theory and communist theory, and it's just really fucking cool. I read this book about a year ago and it really shifted my perspective on gender and sexuality, which is what it's about. Stone Butch Blues follows a butch lesbian basically from the first time they question their gender and sexuality to the last time they do, and it is so beautifully written. It's a fictional novel, but it's very much inspired by Leslie Feinberg's life. It reads like a memoir. It's so personal. It takes place in the 1970s in Buffalo and New York City, and it's just really, really good. Even my dad read this and really loved it, and I think it opened his perspective as well. So even if you're not a queer woman, I think you'll still like this. The writing itself is almost lyrical and it reads like a memoir, and it's just phenomenal. I recommend this book to everyone, especially people who want to read more queer literature. Yeah, I don't know. It's really good. Please read it. If you just Google Stone Butch Blues PDF, there's a free version of it online because Leslie Feinberg did not believe in selling it, but you can buy a copy for like $10 or whatever. So yeah, please read it. It's free. You have no excuse. You're gonna love it, I promise. So this is probably one of my favorite books of all time, but I still think it's a book that is easily digestible by pretty much anyone, and that is Normal People by Sally Rooney. It's also been adapted into a Hulu series, which I think is a good selling point on recommending it to people, because then they'll be like, I can always watch the series first, and if I like that, I'll read the book. But Normal People follows 2 people, Marianne and Connell, as they graduate high school and go through college together, and they fall in love with each other and in love with other people, and it's basically just like a coming of age story with an emphasis on their relationship to each other, and it's so heartbreaking and honest. It's painfully honest, which is my favorite kind of pain. But yeah, Sally Rooney is one of my favorite writers. She captures the way that emotions translate to action and inaction so well. It's scary. I swear this woman has read my diary and just made it sound better and sold it. That's what this feels like. I don't know how else to sell this book to you. Just read it if you haven't. And you know, most people have read this by now because it's so good and so popular, and it's a series. Not to say that I read it before it was cool, but I kind of, you know, read this when it first came out and I really loved it, and I want everyone to love it as much as I do. Like, this is just my personal life, thoughts, emotions, experiences written in a book. And you know, characters are really well developed when you're not sure which one you relate to most. So yes, again, another novel I recommend to everyone, but with special emphasis on this one because this one's so personal to me. So this is probably my most recent read out of these 5 novels, but Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami is a book that I think everyone would enjoy. So Norwegian Wood is a coming-of-age story that follows a boy who lives in Tokyo who is in college, but his high school best friend killed himself, and he is in love with the dead friend's girlfriend. So, talk about, like, emotional baggage. You know, people have their criticisms of Haruki Murakami, and they're all beyond valid, but he is such a strong writer, and I think that his writing style is really unique but still extremely digestible. It kind of feels like a diary, but if a diary was being written in real time. The way that the same amount of attention and detail is put into the big things as they are the small everyday things is really wonderful, and it's just amazing. I just really love this book. I read it in like 2 days last month, and I have already succeeded in getting one person to read it. So if I can convince one more person from this video, my task is done. But yes, this is another book I will probably never stop recommending. The Final Boss is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This book follows a group of Greek students who are just so fucked up. And I don't know how else to put that without, you know, too many spoilers. If you like dark academia and suspense, this book will have you in a chokehold. I struggled to put this down, which I think is part of why I'm so eager to recommend this book. I think that addictive quality that this story has makes it a great recommendation because no one's going to be bored with it. Anytime that the story begins to lull, a layer of suspense is added, or a new dynamic in the friend group is unlocked, or, you know, something else is revealed, and then you just have to keep going to, you know, see how it plays out. And it's just so tense and so phenomenal and so fucked up. Even though this book is a little bit on the longer side, you will blow through it. And as soon as you finish it, you will want to start again because you will have no clue how the hell you ended up where you did. And I think that is part of why I recommend this book to everyone, because it's just such a mindfuck and it's so good. So those are the 5 books that I would recommend to pretty much anyone and everyone. Like I said before, these are some, you know, kind of well-known titles, so if you do like to read, these are not going to be any revolutionary recommendations for you. But these are my go-to recommendations. These are the books that I know anyone I recommend them to will like, and I think that they belong on everyone's bookshelves, quite frankly. Read these if you haven't. If you have, great.